My father gave me to the Mafia boss to pay his debt. Then he fell for me and made me his queen. A desperate father hands over his daughter to a cold crime boss on a stormy night. She expects chains. Instead, he gives her a locked palace, a piano, and a warning. She is under his protection. Forever. But the city whispers, a white rose dipped in blood shows up at the gate, and bullets slam into their car. Someone inside his house wants her gone. She feels his danger and his pull, and then learns the worst secret. The debt wasn't an accident. It was a plan. A trap. Now a hidden traitor uses her as bait. A rival family sharpens knives, and the man who owns the streets is ready to set them on fire to get her back. When the mole is unmasked and war hits dawn, will she run for freedom or choose the crown beside the man who'd burn the world to keep her? Thunder crackles across the harbor as Celeste watches her father's trembling hand scrawl his signature. The warehouse air hangs thick with mildew and desperation. Armed men in dark suits line the walls like statues, their weapons visible beneath tailored jackets. Her father looks skeletal under the harsh fluorescent lights, his once proud shoulders hunched with defeat. Sweat darkens his collar, despite the chill. The sight of him makes her chest ache. Leon Romano stands opposite them at the metal table, immaculate in a charcoal suit that probably costs more than their piano. His presence fills the space with quiet menace. When he speaks, his voice carries the soft danger of a blade being unsheathed. The terms are non-negotiable, Mr. Arden. Debts are paid in what a man values most. Lightning flashes through the high windows, casting stark shadows across Leon's angular features. His dark eyes fix on Celeste with predatory focus. Her father's voice cracks. Please, I can arrange payments. The time for arrangements has passed. Leon's tone brooks no argument. Your daughter is now my collateral. Celeste steps forward, forcing her voice steady despite her racing heart. I want conditions. A murmur ripples through the watching men. Leon's eyebrow lifts slightly, the first crack in his marble facade. You're not in a position to negotiate, Miss Arden? I'm what you're taking. That makes me exactly positioned to negotiate. The words emerge, sharper than intended, but she holds his gaze. I want a piano, and proof my father stays alive and unharmed. Thunder punctuates her demand. Leon studies her for a long moment, head tilted like a predator, considering its prey. Finally, his lips curve into the ghost of a smile. Done. Both conditions are acceptable in exchange for your immediate transfer to my custody. Rain pounds against the metal roof as they move to the pier. Celeste catalogs details with desperate focus, knowing they might matter later. The convoy of black SUVs gleaming wet in the darkness. The way the driver, Rocco, she catches someone call him, has a thin scar along his jaw and kind eyes that don't match his dangerous build. The head of security, Kane, moves with quiet efficiency, coordinating the armed men with subtle hand signals. His competence is reassuring in its professionalism, even as it reminds her how thoroughly trapped she is. Only Silvio, Leon's consigliere, sets off warning bells. His smile is perfect, practiced, empty of warmth. He watches the proceedings with the air of a man mentally taking notes. With shaking fingers, Celeste pulls out her phone and sends Isabel a single word. Taken. Her best friend will understand they'd prepared for this possibility, however remote it had seemed. The formalities proceed with brutal efficiency. Papers are notarized under the pier's harsh lights. A coded call ensures armed escorts will deliver her father home safely. A doctor materializes to document that she's unharmed, his clinical touch making her skin crawl. Your phone! Leone holds out his hand. You'll be provided with a monitored device. I'll allow one final message to your friend. Celeste's fingers hover over the keys, choosing her words carefully. To Isabel, she writes, Safe for now. Protocol active. Love you. The coded reassurance that she's unhurt and following their emergency plans. The rain hammers against the SUV's roof as she slides into the leather interior. Leon sits beside her, his presence both threatening and magnetic. Through the tinted windows, she watches her old life recede with the harbor lights. The convoy pulls away from the pier, each vehicle moving in perfect synchronization. Celeste feels the weight of the moment, her life cleaving into before and after. In the rear window, the city skyline grows smaller, its familiar lights blurring through the rain-streaked glass. She forces herself to breathe steadily, gathering her composure like armor. Her father's desperate face haunts her thoughts, along with the memory of Leon's calculating stare, the piano and her father's safety. She clings to these small victories, these threads of control in a situation spinning beyond her grasp. The SUV's interior smells of expensive leather, and Leon's subtle cologne. His proximity makes her nerve endings spark with awareness, even as her mind screams danger. He hasn't touched her, hasn't even looked at her since they entered the vehicle, but his presence fills the space like smoke. Rocco navigates the wet streets with practiced ease, while Kane rides shotgun, his vigilant gaze scanning their surroundings. Through the partition, she catches fragments of their quiet conversation: routes, security protocols, weather conditions affecting visibility. The storm intensifies, rain drumming against metal and glass. Lightning splits the sky, illuminating the interior in stark bursts. In these flashes, Celeste studies Leon's profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the careful way he holds himself, the signet ring glinting on his right hand. Her new reality settles over her like a weighted blanket, suffocating, yet somehow grounding. She's collateral now, a living guarantee of her father's debt. But she's also something else, a player in this dangerous game, not just a pawn. She proved that with her demands, small as they were. The convoy turns onto the highway, leaving the familiar streets behind. Celeste watches the city lights fade, each mile taking her deeper into uncertainty. The rain continues its relentless rhythm, nature's percussion accompanying this dark overture to her new life. The convoy glides along the coastal highway, each vehicle maintaining precise spacing through the storm. Celeste watches raindrops race across the window, her mind calculating distances and memorizing landmarks. 3 black SUVs, 4 armed men per vehicle, rotating shifts visible through tinted windows. She files away each detail methodically. The wipers slash rhythmically against the glass, creating a hypnotic pattern that contrasts with her racing thoughts. She notes the exact seconds between guard rotations, the makes of their weapons, the way each man scans different sectors. Information is currency in this new world she's been thrust into. Rocco handles the wet roads with casual expertise, his hands light on the wheel as they navigate hairpin turns that drop straight to the churning ocean below. Kane's attention never wavers from potential threats, his eyes constantly scanning the mirrors, one hand resting near his concealed holster. Through the partition, she hears fragments of their coordination with the other vehicles, a continuous loop of position checks and route confirmations. Code words pepper their exchanges, innocuous phrases that she suspects signal danger levels and contingency plans. The storm intensifies as they approach a stretch of unlit overpass, the rain hammering the roof like artillery fire. Lightning flashes illuminate the concrete columns for split seconds before darkness swallows the convoy whole, then explodes into chaos. Glass shatters as bullets punch through windows, the safety glass spiderwebbing before collapsing inward. The rear SUV lurches under the impact of a van, ramming it from behind, metal screaming against metal. 2 motorcycles weave through the rain, their riders firing with military precision, muzzle flashes puncturing the darkness in strobing bursts. Down! Leon's command cuts through the cacophony as he shoves Celeste below the window line, his body partially covering hers. She curls into herself, heart thundering against her ribs as Leon draws his weapon with fluid grace. The sound of his returning fire is deafening in the enclosed space, each blast reverberating through her bones. Each shot finds its mark with terrifying accuracy. 1 motorcycle skids, its rider tumbling into the guardrail, body ragdolling across wet concrete before disappearing over the edge. Kane barks coordinates into his radio, his voice unnaturally calm amid the mayhem, while Rocco executes a defensive maneuver that sends the SUV into a controlled spin. Tires scream against wet asphalt as the vehicle pivots. Celeste's palms scrape against broken glass as she braces herself, blood welling beneath her skin. The second motorcycle and van are forced toward a service ramp, but only one vehicle crashes in a spectacular explosion of metal and sparks. The other attacker disappears into the storm, proof of an inside source who knew their route and the convoy's defensive protocols. Clinic, Leon orders, his voice deadly calm despite the violence that has just erupted. Blood darkens his shoulder where a bullet grazed him, the expensive fabric of his suit torn and soaked, but his focus remains razor sharp. His eyes, cold and calculating, sweep over the damaged vehicle. Sweep the perimeter first. No one enters without verification. The convoy diverts to an unmarked medical facility tucked between high-end boutiques in a quiet district. The building's discreet facade gives no hint of its true purpose. Armed men secure the block while a doctor in expensive loafers and surgical scrubs treats Celeste's cut palms under harsh fluorescent lights. She watches Leon refuse treatment until her hands are cleaned and bandaged, a display of priorities that sends a clear message to everyone present. The hierarchy is established without a word spoken. Only then does he allow the doctor to examine his shoulder, declining stitches despite the recommendation. accepting only antiseptic and a pressure bandage. Rain still falls as they approach Leone's clifftop villa before dawn, water sheeting down the windshield as they climb the winding private road. Massive iron gates part silently, revealing manicured grounds patrolled by armed guards with German shepherds that move like shadows through the wet foliage. Floodlights illuminate the perimeter at strategic intervals, creating pools of harsh light against the darkness. The mansion rises from the cliff face like a modernist fortress, all clean lines, glass, and pale stone, warmed by strategic lighting that makes it glow against the turbulent sky. Inside, marble floors echo their footsteps, the sound bouncing off vaulted ceilings and through cavernous rooms. Ocean wind whistles through high windows, carrying salt and ozone through the spaces, the air tastes of wealth and isolation. Kane leads them through a security checkpoint where cameras track every movement and fingerprint scanners glow blue at doorways. They climb a sweeping staircase to the upper floor, where a suite has been converted into secure quarters that manage to be both luxurious and prison-like. "Your rooms," Leone indicates with a gesture, pushing open double doors to reveal the space. The suite is elegantly appointed, silk bedding in rich jewel tones, hand-knotted Persian rugs that cushion footsteps, artwork worth more than her father's entire debt hanging on walls painted the color of seafoam. But Celeste's attention fixes on the doors, heavy oak with reinforced frames and electronic monitoring. The outer lock clicks from the hallway side with an ominous finality. A second deadbolt on the inside offers an illusion of privacy that feels more like mockery than comfort. "A concession," Leone notes, following her gaze with those penetrating eyes that seem to read her thoughts. "You control the inner lock. I control the outer. Remember which matters more." He leads her down the hall to another room where a restored Bosendorfer grand piano dominates the space, its presence both invitation and command. The instrument's polished ebony surface reflects dawn's first light through floor-to-ceiling windows that frame the raging sea below. The contrast between the violence outside and the instrument's elegant curves isn't lost on her. Celeste's fingers twitch with muscle memory and longing, her bandaged hands aching to touch what once defined her existence. "You may practice here," Leone informs her, his tone brooking no argument as he stands with his back to the panoramic view silhouetted against lightning-streaked clouds. "The rules are simple. You move within the house only with an escort. The grounds are forbidden without accompaniment. When I call, you answer immediately." He pauses, ensuring his words land with proper weight, each syllable precise and measured. "Disobedience will have consequences, for you and your father. His continued breathing depends entirely on your compliance." Celeste stands at the piano, tremors running through her body as the night's events catch up with her. The adrenaline that kept her sharp through the attack now ebbs away, leaving her hollow and shaking. Exhaustion pulls at her bones, but sleep feels impossible, with danger still echoing in her ears. She lifts the fallboard, exposing pristine keys that gleam like teeth. Her bandaged finger presses middle C. The note rings pure and true through stone halls, echoing like a bell, vibrating in her very marrow. That single note contains more truth than anything she's heard since her father's confession. In the doorway, Leone pauses, his broad shoulders tensing almost imperceptibly. Something shifts in his expression as he listens to that single, perfect tone fade into silence. A flicker of something human beneath the predator's mask. Without a word, he turns and walks away, his footsteps fading into the vast house's shadows. But the weight of his presence lingers like a phantom touch. Celeste remains at the bench, surrounded by luxury and isolation, the paradox of her situation as stark as the black and white keys before her. The piano's strings still vibrate with that solitary note, a sound that marks another boundary between her old life and this new existence, where she is both valuable and expendable. Outside the windows, the storm finally breaks, clouds torn apart by dawn winds. Morning light paints the clouds in shades of pearl and rose gold, but she barely notices the beauty. Her world has contracted to this room, these keys, and the echo of a single note hanging in the air. A small act of defiance, the only voice she has left. Sunlight filters through gauzy curtains as a uniformed maid wheels in breakfast on a silver tray. The spread is elaborate, fresh pastries, seasonal fruit, imported coffee, but Celeste barely registers the luxury. Her attention fixes on Kane standing quietly in the doorway, his presence both courteous and immovable. "Your tour begins when you're ready, Miss Arden." His tone is professional, neither warm nor cold. Celeste takes her time, using the meal to observe, The maid's movements are precise but nervous. Kane's stance suggests military training. Every detail matters now. "I'm ready," she announces, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin. Kane guides her through permitted zones with methodical efficiency. Her suite encompasses a sitting room, bedroom, and marble bathroom. The music room gleams with morning light, the Bosendorfer holding pride of place. A winter garden offers tropical plants under glass, while the library's leather and wood speaks of old money. "The security cameras?" she asks, noting their positions. "Standard procedure." Kane's expression doesn't change. "For your protection." Celeste spots at least 3 cameras in each room, their red lights steady. "May I call Isabel?" Kane relays the request through his earpiece. Leon's response comes quickly. 1 monitored call per week, same time, 10 minutes maximum. When they return to her suite, Celeste notices the outer lock has been removed. A small victory until she spots a nearly invisible sensor embedded in the doorframe's molding. Still caged, just with prettier bars. She spends the afternoon mapping her gilded prison. 32 steps from bed to piano. 18 cameras visible in permitted areas. 4 security checkpoints between her and the main entrance. Staff changes every 8 hours, marked by quiet footsteps in the hall. Near the library, she deliberately bumps into a young maid carrying linens. "Oh, I'm so sorry. Maria, isn't it?" The girl's nervous glance at cameras speaks volumes. "Yes, miss. 3rd shift, East Wing." Information gathered, Celeste retreats to observe patrol patterns from her windows. At dusk, when guard rotations create a brief blind spot, she slips into a service stairwell. The curtain cord from her suite makes a serviceable rope. She secures it to a balcony railing and begins her descent toward the cliff path 3 floors below. She manages 3 meters before strong hands grip her waist. Kane pulls her up with gentle inexorability, his expression resigned rather than angry. "This way, Miss Arden." Leon's study is all dark wood and leather, city lights twinkling through floor-to-ceiling windows. He doesn't look up from his laptop as Kane settles her into a chair. "I wondered how long it would take," Leon says finally, closing his computer. His voice holds no anger, only calm certainty. He lifts his phone, taps once. Every phone in the house chimes simultaneously. Doors thud shut in rapid succession, locks engaging with pneumatic hisses. 10 seconds of total lockdown that demonstrate how completely he controls her environment. "You're under protective custody until the debt is cleared," he states. "Fighting this will only make it harder." He studies her for a long moment. "Let's try something different. Honesty for honesty." Celeste's laugh holds no humor. "You expect honesty while keeping me prisoner?" "I expect rational behavior from an intelligent woman." Leon leans back. "What do you want?" She considers her leverage, minimal but not zero. "My own clothes, a journal, a metronome for practice." "Done!" He nods. "Now my question. What do you fear most?" The question catches her off guard. She could lie, but something in his steady gaze makes her choose truth. "Becoming invisible, disappearing so completely that no one remembers who I was." Something flickers in his expression. Recognition, perhaps. "You won't disappear here, Celeste. I give you my word." Hours later, she lies in bed, watching the sensor's tiny light pulse in the darkness. Waves crash against the cliffs below, a ceaseless rhythm that matches her heartbeat. The truth settles over her like a weight. Escape isn't possible. Not yet. Not while Leon holds all the cards and knows all the moves. She catalogs her assets, weekly calls to Isabel, slightly more freedom of movement, and Leona's unexpected offer of honesty. Small advantages, but better than none. The sensor light blinks steadily, marking time like a metronome, while Celeste begins to plan her next move in this dangerous game. The waves below offer their constant percussion. Crash, retreat, crash, retreat. She matches her breathing to their rhythm, forcing her mind to settle. Survival requires patience. She can't outrun them, can't outfight them, but perhaps she can outlast them. For now, she'll play her role, the cooperative captive, the musician in her gilded cage. Her bandaged palms still sting from the morning's violence. The memory of gunfire echoes in her mind, mixed with the perfect tone of Middle C and Leon's calculated display of power. Everything here is a message, a test, a move in a game she's only beginning to understand. The sensor continues its silent vigil. Leon's technology, watching even in darkness. Celeste closes her eyes but doesn't sleep. listening to the ocean's relentless rhythm, while her mind catalogs facts, patterns, possibilities. Tomorrow, she'll begin testing different boundaries, searching for cracks in the fortress Leon has built around her. But tonight, she simply breathes, counting waves, waiting for dawn. The dining room's crystal chandeliers cast elegant shadows across the mahogany table as evening settled over the villa. Celeste sat at the far end, her position a calculated statement, close enough to demonstrate Leon's control, far enough to emphasize her status as outsider. The sea beyond the windows had turned obsidian, reflecting nothing but distant lights. Vittoria commanded the seat to Leon's right, her silver hair swept into an immaculate chignon, diamond drops catching light at her ears. Across from her, Silvio lounged with practiced ease, though his eyes never stopped moving. Kane stood at parade rest near the door, while two captains, Marco from the docks and Anthony from distribution, filled out the gathering. A civilized dinner, Leon had told Celeste earlier. You'll observe nothing more. Now she watched the dance of power play out over 7 courses. When Leon lifted his crystal wine glass, conversations paused mid-syllable. When he spoke, heads inclined slightly toward him, like flowers tracking the sun. Even the servers moved differently in his presence, their steps measured and precise. The southeastern route needs adjustment, Vittoria noted, her fork poised over poached sea bass. Customs has new protocols. Already handled, Silvio interjected smoothly. I have a contact in the department. Leon's slight nod carried more weight than a proclamation. Celeste noticed how Vittoria's lips tightened almost imperceptibly at Silvio's response. The micro-expression gone in a flash. A young courier appeared in the doorway, tension visible in his shoulders as Kane stepped forward to intercept him. Sir, forgive the interruption. The Milwaukee shipment, there was a delay. The room went still. Celeste watched Leon set down his fork with deliberate care. Explain. The courier's words tumbled out. Weather grounded the plane. I redirected through Detroit, but missed the connection. It's 12 hours behind schedule. Leone studied him for a long moment while sweat beaded on the courier's forehead. Then he reached for a tablet, fingers moving swiftly. Your mother in Cleveland? She's still managing alone since your father passed? Yes, sir. The delay cost us, but family matters more. Leon turned the tablet so only Celeste could glimpse the screen for a moment. A 5-figure transfer to an account labeled Maria Rossi. Don't let it happen again. Thank you, sir. It won't. The courier backed away, relief evident in every line of his body. Celeste filed away this new piece of information. Leon's mercy was as calculated as his cruelty, each act of kindness building deeper loyalty than fear alone could ensure. The meal progressed through its careful choreography. Vittoria steered conversation toward safer waters, upcoming charity galas, a new restaurant opening downtown. But Celeste caught the undercurrents, territory markers in seemingly innocent comments about neighborhood developments, alliances mapped in discussions of social events. When the last plates were cleared, Leon rose. Miss Arden, join me in the winter garden. The glass-enclosed space felt like stepping into another world. Moonlight filtered through tropical foliage, creating patterns on the marble floor. Water trickled from a small fountain. Its quiet music mixing with the distant surf. I heard you playing this afternoon, Leon said, stopping near a potted palm. Chopin's Ballade in G minor. Your technique is excellent. You know classical music. I know many things. He turned to face her. Tell me about the first piece you truly loved. The question caught her off guard with its genuineness. Nocturne, in C-sharp minor. It sounds like the moment before a storm breaks. All that tension in the air, the weight of waiting. Before she could move toward the piano, rapid footsteps approached. Rocco appeared, his usual easy manner replaced by urgent focus. He carried a small velvet box. Left at the gate 5 minutes ago. No cameras caught the delivery. Leon took the box, opened it with careful fingers. Inside, a single white rose lay against black velvet, its tips stained crimson. Beneath it, a heavy card bore the unmistakable stamp of the Bianchi family crest. Leone read the message aloud, each word carved from ice. Return what isn't yours, or we take her in pieces. The change was immediate. Leon's jaw hardened to granite, his eyes turning dangerous. Full lockdown, double the perimeter guards. I want every associate's movements for the past week on my desk in an hour. He looked at Celeste, something almost gentle crossing his face before vanishing. Kane will escort you to the music room. Stay there until I come. As they left the winter garden, the house transformed around them. Guards materialized from shadows, communications crackled through earpieces, doors sealed with pneumatic hisses. Kane guided her silently to the music room, taking up position outside while 2 more guards appeared at each end of the hall. Celeste sat at the piano, her fingers finding the keys without thought. Through the tall windows, she could see dark figures moving across the grounds, their weapons visible in moonlight. Leon stood at the study window, 1 floor above, his silhouette rigid with promised violence. She struck the first note of the nocturne, letting it hover in the air. The sound rippled through the tense atmosphere, a counterpoint to the efficient deployment of force occurring beyond the walls. As her hands positioned for the next chord, she realized she'd become more than collateral in a debt. She was now a piece in a larger war, and Leon's reaction suggested he hadn't anticipated this particular move. The note faded while guards continued their sweep of the grounds, their flashlight beams cutting through darkness like searching fingers. Above, Leon remained motionless at the window, his stance speaking of calculations and consequences that would reshape the nights to come. Dawn painted the music room in watercolor grays as Celeste's fingers danced through scales. Each note, precise, measured, a mathematical certainty in a world that had lost all predictability. She sensed Leon before she saw him. A shift in the air, the weight of observation. He stood in the doorway, suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled to expose forearms marked with old scars. His focus settled on her hands moving across ivory keys, studying their rhythm with the same intensity he brought to everything. "Your technique is flawless," he said, voice low enough not to break the morning quiet. "Why didn't you join an orchestra?" Celeste's fingers didn't falter. "I don't audition for people who want to own my sound. And yet here you are, not by choice." But she kept playing, the scales flowing into an improvised melody. "No," he agreed, "but you're making the best of it." The day unfolded in careful measures. Breakfast arrived on silver trays. Fresh fruit, coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in, pastries still warm from the oven. Guards rotated shifts with clockwork precision while Celeste spent an hour in the library, pretending not to notice how Leon's security chief tracked her movements through camera feeds. Gunfire echoed from a distant wing. Target practice. She'd learned to recognize the rhythm of drills. The sound no longer made her flinch. Strange, how quickly the extraordinary could become routine. In the afternoon, Leon found her by the winter garden's tall windows. "Come here," he said, gesturing her closer. "What do you see?" She approached cautiously. "Trees, the cliff path, ocean beyond." "Look again. Where are the sight lines?" Understanding dawned. He was teaching her to read the room as he did. Points of vulnerability, angles of protection. She studied the space with new eyes. "The eastern window is exposed to the upper terrace," she said slowly. "But the stone pillars provide cover if you stay in their shadow. The western side is blind to approach, except through the house." Good. His approval shouldn't have warmed her. Now the library. They moved through the house, Leon pointing out defensive positions while Celeste mapped escape routes she hoped never to need. When his shoulder twinged from yesterday's wound, she caught the microscopic tension in his jaw. "Here," she said, stepping closer. "Breathe with me. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. It steadies the muscle." He matched her rhythm, and gradually the tension eased. Something shifted between them, a moment of mutual vulnerability, quickly masked. "My father was murdered when I was 17, he said abruptly. "Shot in his own garden while pruning roses. The grief! It made me useful to the family. Pain can be weaponized." "Is that why you took over?" "Someone had to." His voice held old shadows. "Your turn. Why stay with your father all these years? You must have known what he was." "Loyalty," Celeste answered. "Not illusion. He's still my father, even when he fails." Evening drew its purple curtain across the sky. They ended up in the library, Leon pulling down a volume of Italian poetry while Celeste traced book spines with careful fingers. "Read this," he said, offering the book. "Your accent needs work." She accepted the challenge, stumbling through verses, until the words began to flow. When she looked up, Leon had moved closer, his presence filling the narrow aisle between shelves. "Again," he murmured. "The 3rd stanza." She began to read, but his hand came up, tilting the book aside. His other hand found her waist, drawing her in with inexorable gentleness. The kiss, when it came, was controlled intensity, heat contained within iron boundaries. Then he pulled back, breathing ragged. "I won't take what isn't freely given," he said hoarsely. Remember that! Celeste fled to her suite, pulse hammering. The door closed with a soft click behind her, and she pressed her forehead against the cool wood. Her lips still burned from his kiss, body humming with want she refused to acknowledge. The sensor light blinked steadily in its hidden alcove, a mechanical eye watching her internal war. She was furious with herself for wanting him, for letting him affect her, for the treacherous part of her that wondered what it would feel like to surrender. She paced the room, trying to untangle the knot of emotions in her chest. The man had claimed her like property, held her hostage in a gilded cage. She should hate him? Instead, she found herself drawn to the contradictions. His calculated mercy, the gentleness beneath his control, the way he taught her to survive in his world while promising she'd never have to use those skills. Moonlight spilled through the windows, turning the room to silver and shadow. In the distance, waves crashed against the cliff base in their eternal rhythm. Celeste touched her lips, remembering the precise pressure of his kiss, the restraint that spoke of banked fire. The sensor continued its unblinking vigil as she moved to the window. Below, guards patrolled the grounds with measured steps. Somewhere in the house, Leon was probably reviewing security reports, planning counters to the Bianchi threat, ruling his carefully ordered world. She pressed her palm against the glass, cool and solid beneath her touch. The woman reflected there looked both familiar and strange, still herself, but changed by circumstances, by proximity, by the growing realization that captivity wasn't quite what she'd expected. The night deepened around her while she stood at the window, caught between what she should feel and what she did feel, the sensor's steady light marking time like a metronome. Morning light had barely faded when Leon appeared in Celeste's doorway, his presence filling the frame. "There's a charity gala tomorrow night. You'll attend with me." It wasn't a request. She looked up from her book, noting the tension in his shoulders. "Why?" "Optics. The Bianchi's threat requires a public response. Your presence under my explicit protection sends a message." Within hours, Vittoria swept in with an arsenal of garment bags. "Stand," she commanded, unzipping the first one. "We don't have much time." Celeste found herself surrounded by silk and tulle as Vittoria efficiently sorted through options. "This one," she decided, holding up a midnight blue gown with a dramatic back. "It says exactly what we need it to." The seamstress arrived moments later, pins between her lips as she worked the hem. Celeste stood still, watching the controlled chaos in her mirror reflection. The dress transformed her, less hostage, more consort. The thought unsettled her. Kane appeared next, tablet in hand. "Main entrance, south exit, service corridor," he listed, marking points on the ballroom blueprint. "Memorize these. If anything happens, you stay with Leon or me. Clear?" "Crystal." Celeste traced the escape routes with her finger, committing them to memory. She spent the afternoon practicing her neutral smile, the one that revealed nothing while observing everything. The mirror reflected back a woman she barely recognized, poised, controlled, dangerous in her own quiet way. The following evening, Leon waited at the foot of the grand staircase. His sharp intake of breath when she descended made her pulse skip. He offered his arm without a word, and they moved to the waiting car in perfect synchronization. The charity gala sparkled with wealth and hidden agendas. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across marble floors, while string quartets played in alcoves. Celeste felt eyes tracking their entrance, Leon in impeccable black tie, her blue gown floating like ink in water. Whispers followed them through the crowd. She caught fragments. "Romano's new acquisition? Collateral arrangement? Temporary entertainment?" Leon's hand at her waist guided her through the social minefield. He introduced her to key players with careful precision, neither flaunting nor hiding her presence. She played her part, smile fixed, back straight, noting which faces showed genuine respect and which masked calculation. Near the champagne tower, she found herself cornered by Captain Marco Russo, known for his territorial ambitions. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Such a lovely addition to Leone's collection," he said, voice oily. "Though I wonder how long the novelty will last. Men like him tire quickly of their toys." Before Celeste could respond, Leon materialized beside her. His smile was razor-sharp, all teeth and warning. "Captain Russo," he said smoothly. "I see you've met Celeste. She's under my protection, permanently." His palm settled at the small of her back, warm through the silk. The possessive gesture was both shield and statement. Russo's face paled slightly. He mumbled apologies and retreated, leaving them alone in their bubble of tension. The orchestra began a Strauss waltz. Leona's hand slid from her back to her waist. "Dance with me," he murmured, already leading her to the floor. They moved together as if they'd rehearsed for weeks. His lead was subtle but absolute, guiding her through turns that made her dress swirl like midnight waves. The air between them crackled with unspoken things. "Everyone's watching," she whispered. "Let them." His thumb traced circles on her waist. "They need to understand exactly what you mean to me." The dance ended too soon, and not soon enough. They made their excuses shortly after, sliding into the waiting limo as the city lights blurred past. The privacy screen was up. Leon's control, held so rigid all evening, began to crack. His hand found her neck, thumb tracing her pulse point. She leaned into his touch, wine and adrenaline making her bold. He groaned softly as she twisted her fingers in his hair, pulling him closer. His mouth found her throat, trailing fire. She arched into him, wanting more, wanting everything. Then he pulled back, breathing hard. "Not like this," he said roughly. "Not with champagne and survival instincts clouding everything. When I take you, Karita, you'll be clear-headed and certain." The limo turned through the villa gates, gravel crunching under the tires. Guards snapped to attention as they passed, moonlight glinting off weapon barrels. Above, the house blazed with welcome, windows golden against the cliff face. They sat in charged silence, both trembling with restraint as the car drew to a stop. Leon helped her out, ever the gentleman, though his hands shook slightly. The night air was cold and clean, clearing some of the fog from her mind. The front door opened, spilling light across the courtyard. Inside, the house hummed with its usual rhythms. Guards changing shifts, kitchen staff preparing tomorrow's meals, surveillance systems tracking every movement. Celeste paused at the base of the stairs, looking back at Leon. His expression was raw, stripped of its usual perfect control. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, acknowledging the shift in their careful dance. Then she turned and climbed the stairs, the whisper of her dress the only sound. Behind her, she heard Leonie exhale slowly, deliberately, like a man stepping back from the edge of a cliff. Morning sun glinted off the delivery truck's white panels as it idled at the villa gates. The guard stepped forward to check paperwork, routine etched in every movement. Celeste watched from the front steps, enjoying her first coffee of the day, while Leon reviewed reports beside her. Everything changed in heartbeats. The truck's rear doors exploded outward. Two men in black tactical gear emerged, weapons already raised. The guard reached for his sidearm, too late. Gunfire shattered the morning calm. Leon moved like lightning. One moment he was beside her, the next she was behind a massive stone column, his body shielding hers. His gun appeared in his hand as if conjured. The first attacker went down instantly, a clean headshot that sprayed red across the pristine driveway. Kane emerged from cover, his shot deliberate and precise, taking the second gunman in the shoulder. The man crumpled, weapon clattering away. It was over in seconds. Silence rushed back in, broken only by boots on gravel as security swarmed the scene. Celeste's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Her coffee cup lay shattered on the steps, dark liquid seeping between the stones. Leon holstered his weapon and turned to her. His expression shifted from lethal focus to something softer, seeing her trembling. "Breathe with me," he said quietly, taking her hands in his. He pressed her palms flat against his chest. Under her fingers, his heart beat strong and steady. Not the mechanical rhythm of a killer, but the warm pulse of a man. "Feel that! Match it! Slow and deep!" She tried to focus on his heartbeat, not the copper smell of blood carried on the breeze. His thumb traced circles on her wrist, grounding her in the present moment. Kane approached, face grim. "Subject secure in the holding room. He's talking already." Leon's jaw tightened, though his hands remained gentle on Celeste's. "And? Gate codes. Someone gave them the daily rotation." Kane's words fell like stones in still water. "Has to be inner circle." Celeste felt Leon go rigid. The implications settled heavy in the air. Betrayal from someone he trusted. Someone with access to the most secure protocols. Security teams cleared the scene with practiced efficiency. The dead attacker disappeared into a black bag. Blood was hosed away, leaving dark patches on sun-warmed stone. The delivery truck was towed to a secure location for processing. Inside, the villa hummed with controlled tension. Leon installed Celeste in the music room while doctors checked her for shock. A maid brought tea, sweetened with too much sugar, hands trembling slightly as she set down the cup. Through the open door, Celeste caught fragments of conversation from Leon's study across the hall. Words like audit and communications review drifted in. She heard the steel in his voice as he ordered complete surveillance records of everyone with code clearance. The weight of it settled in her chest. Leon would have to investigate people he'd known for years, trusted allies, family even. The cost of keeping her safe might be destroying bonds built over decades. She sipped her tea, watching shadows lengthen across the floor. The doctors had left, satisfied she was physically fine. But her mind kept replaying the morning's violence in vivid detail, the crack of gunfire, the spray of blood, the terrible efficiency with which Leon had acted. Evening painted the sky in watercolor shades of pink and gold. Celeste stood on her balcony, letting the wind tangle her hair. Below, guards patrolled with renewed vigilance. The ocean crashed against the cliffs in its eternal rhythm, indifferent to human dramas. She heard Leon's footsteps behind her, recognized his presence before he spoke. He joined her at the railing, close enough that she felt his warmth, but not quite touching. "I will keep you safe," he said quietly, eyes on the horizon. "Whatever it costs." The words sent a shiver down her spine. Promise and threat tangled together. She looked at his profile, sharp against the dying light. He would tear his own world apart to protect her. The thought both seduced and terrified her. His hand found hers on the railing, fingers intertwining. Below them, guards changed shifts as dusk settled over the villa. The air filled with salt spray and the weight of decisions yet to come. Celeste let her fingers tighten around his, acknowledging without words the price of his protection. The wind carried the last traces of gunsmoke away, replacing it with the clean scent of the sea. On the horizon, stars began to appear, diamond bright against deepening blue. The villa settled into its nighttime routine, lights coming on in windows, kitchen staff preparing dinner, security cameras tracking every movement. But here on the balcony, time seemed suspended between one moment and the next, held in the space between their clasped hands and unspoken promises. Leon's thumb traced the same soothing pattern he'd used that morning, but now it felt less like comfort and more like claiming. She should have been frightened by his intensity, his capacity for violence, his willingness to burn everything for her safety. Instead, she found herself leaning into his warmth as darkness gathered around them. The last light faded from the sky, leaving them in the gentle glow spilling from her room. Neither moved to go inside, content to stand in silence as stars multiplied overhead and waves crashed below. Each breath carried the weight of the morning's violence and the evening's promise. "I will keep you safe, whatever it costs." The grandfather clock in the hallway struck midnight as Celeste's fingers moved over the monitored phone screen. The house had settled into its nighttime rhythm, guards patrolling, waves crashing against the cliffs, security cameras whirring in their endless watch. But sleep eluded her, mind still racing from the morning's violence. She opened the browser, muscle memory guiding her through her father's email login. The blue light illuminated her face as she scrolled through years of correspondence, searching for answers. Then she found them. A trail of calculated bank transfers, carefully orchestrated losses, meetings arranged with precise intention. Her breath caught. The numbers told a story she couldn't deny. This wasn't desperation or bad luck. Her father had engineered every step, deliberately accumulating a debt he knew would force Leon's hand. He'd traded her like a chess piece, believing her captivity would buy him protection. The phone trembled in her grip. She rose from the chaise, bare feet silent on marble floors, as she made her way to Leon's study. Light spilled from beneath the door. He was still awake, probably reviewing security footage from the attack. She didn't knock. The door swung open to reveal Leone at his desk, sleeves rolled up, papers spread before him. He looked up, expression shifting as he read her face. "You knew," she said, voice raw, "about my father." The debt was planned. Leone set down his pen. "I suspected. We've been gathering proof." "How long?" "Since the dock. The numbers didn't align with standard gambling losses." The betrayal hit her in waves. Her father's calculated sacrifice. Leone's silent investigation. "Were you going to tell me?" "When we had concrete evidence." He stood, moving around the desk. "I wanted to protect you from..." "From what? The truth?" Anger flared, hot and bright. "You're just another jailer. Different cage, same chains. If I were your jailer, you wouldn't have a phone, or a piano, or medical care after the ambush." His voice stayed level, but tension lined his shoulders. "Every decision since the dock has been about your safety, even at the cost of my pride." "Your pride?" She laughed, brittle and sharp. "What about my choice? My agency?" "Agency." His control cracked slightly. You chose to step between us at the warehouse. You negotiated terms. I've honored everyone. After claiming me as collateral. To keep you alive! The words echoed off marble. He drew a slow breath, reining himself in. Your father's debt made you a target. Taking you under my protection was the only way to ensure your survival. Celeste wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. The truth of his words didn't make them hurt less. He sold me, his own daughter. Leone's expression softened fractionally. Yes, but you're not property to be sold. Not to him. Not to me. She turned away, unable to bear the intensity of his gaze. Her feet carried her to the music room, muscle memory guiding her to the piano bench. Her fingers found the keys and she played, wild, angry pieces that matched the storm in her chest. Through the haze of music and pain, she heard Leone on the phone in the hallway, voice low and precise. Maintain distance surveillance on Anthony Arden. Keep him alive and uninvolved in any Bianchi action, full detail, rotating shifts. The melody shifted to something darker, minor chords that echoed her father's betrayal. She played until her fingers ached, until the rage bled into exhaustion. The songs changed without conscious thought. Chopin to Beethoven to Rachmaninoff, each piece a different shade of hurt. Near dawn, the monitored phone lit up with Isabel's caller ID. Celeste answered, hands still trembling. Hey, Isabel's voice was gentle. Your father's home. Guards are subtle. Neighbors won't notice. Is he? Celeste couldn't finish the question. Safe but shifty, won't give me straight answers about anything. A pause. Are you okay? No. The truth slipped out before she could stop it. But I will be. They talked until Isabel had to leave for work, the conversation carefully clean of anything that might trigger security protocols. When the call ended, exhaustion hit like a wave. Celeste curled up on the chaise, too drained to make it back to her suite. The piano keys gleamed in the pre-dawn light, silent witnesses to her pain. Her eyes grew heavy as the sky outside began to lighten. She was nearly asleep when she heard Leone's quiet footsteps. A soft weight settled over her, a cashmere blanket, warm and impossibly soft. Through half-closed eyes, she saw his hand hover near her hair, as if he wanted to smooth back the strands but couldn't bring himself to cross that line. The moment stretched, fragile as spun glass. Then he withdrew, footsteps fading down the hallway while the first rays of sun painted the room in shades of gold. Celeste drifted off, wrapped in cashmere and complicated truths, while somewhere in the house, Leone kept his vigil and the waves crashed endlessly against the cliffs below. The blanket carried a trace of his cologne, sandalwood, and something darker, like thunder before rain. In her last moments of consciousness, Celeste wondered when his scent had become familiar, when it had started to mean safety instead of capture. But sleep claimed her before she could follow that dangerous thought to its conclusion. Guards changed shifts outside, their movements precise and practiced. Security cameras tracked every shadow. The villa stirred to life as staff began their morning routines. But in the music room, time seemed suspended, held in the space between one breath and the next, in the weight of a blanket and the ghost of an almost touch. The morning sun cast long shadows across Celeste's suite as a maid set down a silver coffee tray, the china cups rattling slightly. Kane stood in the doorway, his usual stoic demeanor replaced by something darker. His shoulders, typically squared with military precision, carried an unfamiliar weight. Ms. Arden, his voice was gravel rough. Your presence is required in Mr. Romano's study. She followed him through the marble halls, noting how the guards watched Kane with wary eyes. In the study, Leone stood at the window, his reflection hard as granite in the glass. Silvio sat at the desk, fingers steepled, while Rocco leaned against the wall, face uncharacteristically grim. Tell her, Leone commanded without turning. Silvio cleared his throat. The metadata analysis is complete. Gate access codes were pulled at 2:47 a.m. yesterday, exactly 30 minutes before the attack. The credentials used belonged to Kane. Celeste's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. That's impossible. Digital signatures don't lie, Silvio said smoothly. The trace is clear. Kane stood at parade rest, accepting the accusation with the same quiet dignity he brought to everything. I understand the protocols, sir. I accept whatever consequences deemed appropriate. Leone finally turned, his eyes glacial. You know what our code demands for betrayal? Wait! Celeste set down her cup with a sharp crack. Kane saved my life twice. At the stairwell, at the gates. He could have let me die either time if he was working against us. Evidence is evidence, Silvio interjected. Then give me 24 hours to find different evidence. Celeste met Leon's gaze directly. Please. A tense silence filled the room. Leon studied her face, then nodded once. Because you ask. Rocco, watch him. Silvio, continue the internal review. Celeste spent the morning in the security office, poring over footage while her mind raced. Something wasn't adding up. She requested the gala seating chart, noting how Silvio had been placed suspiciously close to a staff entrance. Walking the halls, she felt a draft from a service door that suggested frequent use, perfect for swapping key cards without detection. In the laundry, she questioned the head housekeeper about schedules. A uniform had gone missing for exactly 1 hour 2 days ago, then reappeared as if nothing had happened. The perfect window for someone to slip through security wearing staff credentials. But it was the CCTV archives that made her breath catch. There, during the exact 2-minute window when the gate codes were accessed, the footage showed a subtle loop. Most wouldn't notice the same guard walking past with identical footsteps. But Celeste had spent weeks studying these halls. She sat back, mind racing. A loop that precise required intimate knowledge of the security systems. More importantly, it required current access to plant the fake footage. Only someone managing the internal audit could hide their tracks so effectively. The sun was setting when she finally saw the full picture. Her hands shook slightly as she wrote the note. Check who controls the cameras. It isn't Kane. The villa had grown quiet, most staff retired for the evening. Celeste's footsteps echoed on marble as she approached Leon's study. She knelt, sliding the note under his door with trembling fingers. Standing, she caught her reflection in a hallway mirror, dark circles under her eyes, hair escaping its pins, determination written across her features. Behind her, Kane sat in the library under Rocco's watch, his future hanging by a thread. Guards passed on their rounds, nodding respectfully. In the distance, waves crashed against the cliffs. The security cameras whirred quietly, recording everything, and perhaps hiding more than anyone suspected. Celeste touched the piano keys as she passed the music room, a single note ringing out. It hung in the air like a question waiting to be answered, like the truth waiting to be uncovered. Somewhere in the house, Leon would be reading her note, connecting the same dots she had. She paused at her suite door, remembering Kane's steady presence during the ambush, his unflinching protection. The thought of him being punished for someone else's betrayal made her stomach turn. The hidden sensor in her doorframe blinked its steady red eye. Cameras watched from discreet corners. Everything in the villa was observed, recorded, controlled. But only someone at the very top of the security chain could manipulate those recordings without detection. She closed her door softly, listening to the night sounds of the villa. Guards murmured into radios. The security system hummed. And somewhere, behind all the cameras and codes, lurked the real traitor, someone who thought they were too clever to be caught. The ocean wind rattled her windows, carrying salt and secrets. 24 hours to prove Kane's innocence. 24 hours to expose a betrayal that went deeper than anyone suspected. The game had changed, and Celeste was no longer just a hostage. She was now a player. She sat at her desk, spreading out her notes, connecting threads that only she could see. The gala seating chart, the missing uniform, the camera loop. Each piece was a note in a larger composition, and she could finally hear the dark melody they created. The night stretched ahead, full of possibilities and dangers. In the library, Kane waited under guard. In his study, Leon read her warning. And somewhere in the villa, someone thought they had orchestrated the perfect frame. But they hadn't counted on a pianist's eye for patterns, or her stubborn refusal to let an innocent man fall. The truth was there in the details, in the timing of security shifts, in the placement of cameras, in the careful manipulation of digital breadcrumbs. Leon stood in his study, Celeste's note crumpling in his grip as he reviewed the security logs displayed across 3 monitors. His jaw tightened as patterns emerged, system access timestamps that didn't align with scheduled maintenance, camera outages that coincided too perfectly with security breaches. Silvio's digital signature appeared repeatedly, authorizing Kane's audit, requesting emergency camera maintenance, adjusting guard rotations. Each action seemed reasonable in isolation. Together, they formed a calculated design. "Sir!" Kane's voice crackled through the intercom. "Ms. Arden's scheduled call with Isabel begins in 5 minutes. Leon checked his watch. 7 p.m. sharp. The weekly ritual that gave Celeste a thread of normalcy. He'd arranged for the calls to happen in the secure phone room away from potential surveillance. A security alert flashed across his screen. Motion sensors triggered at the east perimeter. Kane's voice returned, tense. Possible breach. Moving to investigate. Hold position, Leone ordered, but static answered. The comms were down. In the phone room, Celeste sat with the monitored line open, Isabel's voice warm on the other end. How are you holding up? Before she could answer, the door burst open. 2 masked men in tactical gear rushed in. Celeste reacted instantly, muscle memory from Leone's defense lessons kicking in. She drove her elbow back, catching the first attacker in the ribs. Her nails raked across exposed skin at his neck as he grabbed her, drawing blood. The man cursed, his grip loosening. A thin chain snapped free in her hand, some kind of medallion. She curled her fingers around it, sliding it up her sleeve as they wrestled her down. Celeste? Isabel's panicked voice came through the dropped phone. What's happening? A hood descended over Celeste's head. Rough hands lifted her, carrying her through familiar corridors now made strange by darkness. She counted steps, tracked turns, fighting to maintain orientation as they moved. In his study, Leone saw the security feeds cut out one by one. He sprinted toward the phone room, gun drawn, Rocco and 2 guards flanking him. They found the room empty, signs of struggle evident in overturned furniture and blood drops on the floor. Outside, tires squealed on wet pavement. A black sedan, not one of theirs, peeled through the side gate where Kane should have been stationed. Leone emptied his clip at the retreating vehicle, but it vanished into the gathering dusk. Fury and fear warred in his chest as he surveyed the breach. His house had been penetrated, his security compromised. The woman he'd sworn to protect, taken. And he'd ignored the warning signs, telling himself the threat would come from outside, not from his inner circle. Find Kane, he barked at Rocco. Lock down Silvio's access. No one leaves until... His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. A photo of Celeste appeared, hood removed, zip tied to a chair. The Bianchi family crest hung on the wall behind her. Leone's mind shifted into tactical mode, emotional walls slamming up. This was why attachment was dangerous. Why caring made you vulnerable. He'd let himself be distracted by her music, her defiance, her insight. And now his enemies had exactly what they wanted. Sir? Rocco waited for orders. Label her out of play, Leone said, voice flat. Cut off all surveillance. If she's beyond our reach, she can't be used against us. The words felt like ash in his mouth. Even as he spoke them, his tactical brain rebelled against the logic. If she was truly out of play, why send the photo? Why make such a production of taking her? Because this wasn't about removing a piece from the board. This was about forcing his hand. The realization hit as he remembered her note about the cameras. She'd seen the pattern when he couldn't, had tried to warn him, and he'd failed to act fast enough. Belay that order, he snapped. Full mobilization. I want every safe house, warehouse, and dock under Bianchi control located and mapped within the hour. Activate all surveillance networks, and find me Silvio's current location. In a warehouse across the city, Celeste's hood was yanked off. Chain link fence formed a makeshift cell, the metal cold against her palms as she steadied herself. The medallion remained hidden in her sleeve, its edges pressing into her skin like a promise. Footsteps echoed on concrete. A familiar figure emerged from the shadows, his usual polished smile now sharp with triumph. You were always the fuse, Silvio said, studying her through the fence. The spark that would finally make everything burn. Celeste met his gaze steadily, mind racing. The warehouse air smelled of salt and rust. Somewhere distant, ships' horns sounded across the harbor. She focused on details, forcing down panic. The angle of light through high windows, the pattern of footsteps outside her cell, the weight of evidence concealed in her sleeve. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their boots marking time like a metronome. Above them, the Bianchi crest caught what remained of the daylight, its silver surface gleaming with promise or threat. She couldn't tell which. All she knew was that she wasn't just a hostage anymore. She was the catalyst for whatever came next. The city's night transformed into a chessboard of power moves and calculated strikes. Leone stood at his study window, phone pressed to his ear, watching lights flicker across the harbor like warning shots. Seal every dock from Marina North to South Basin, he ordered. I want container manifest for the last 72 hours. Buy the longshoreman's silence if you have to. His voice carried the quiet certainty of a man who'd learned to weaponize patience. Each call brought another piece under his control. Warehouse supervisors, transit routes, storage facilities. Money flowed from encrypted accounts, purchasing loyalty in neat digital transfers. At precisely midnight, he activated a recorded message that broadcast across every enemy frequency. You carry my mark. I am coming. The words rolled through the underground networks like thunder before a storm. In her makeshift cell, Celeste pressed her ear to the concrete floor. A steady mechanical hum vibrated through the surface. Generators, probably backup power. She counted guard rotations. 2 men every 15 minutes. Clockwise pattern, 3-minute gap at the northeast corner. She worked the chain from her sleeve and slid it beneath a loose brick near the fence post, marking its location with a small scratch. The guards' boots echoed on metal walkways above. Their conversations drifted down in fragments. Shifts changing, orders passed, mention of reinforcements needed at the perimeter. She filed each detail away like notes in a score. Across town, Vittoria convened an emergency council in a private clubroom. Senior family members gathered around a mahogany table as she laid out evidence, bank statements, transfer records, surveillance logs. Silvio maintained 3 shadow accounts, she explained, sliding documents forward. Here, here, and here, small amounts siphoned over months, building a war chest. He's been planning this since before the debt collection. Kane stood at attention by the door, restored to his post after digital forensics proved the access logs were forged. His jaw clenched as he studied the financial trail that had nearly destroyed him. The timestamps were altered, he reported. Someone with administrative access rewrote the security logs. Only 3 people had that clearance. Leone absorbed the information with dangerous stillness. He spread a map across the table, marking potential locations with precise red circles. 3 warehouses fit the profile. This one near the container yard, this one by the rail terminal, and this one upriver where the old factories are. He dispatched teams to the first 2 sites while he prepared to personally lead the strike on the 3rd. A sprawling complex where security cameras had caught glimpses of a distinctive black van hours after Celeste disappeared. In her cell, Celeste tracked time through guard changes and distant ship horns. She'd mapped every exit, every blind spot, every potential weapon. The floor's vibration told her the generators were directly below, vital systems that couldn't be shut down without raising alarms. Leone moved through his armory with mechanical precision. Kevlar vest secured with practiced motions, backup piece strapped to his ankle, combat knife sliding into his boot sheath. Each item checked and rechecked while his mind ran contingencies. Vittoria coordinated intelligence from the command center, directing surveillance teams and monitoring police bands. Bianchi's men are moving, she reported. 3 vehicles headed north along the river road. They're expecting us to hit the obvious targets first, Leone replied, checking his primary weapons magazine. Keep the pressure on those locations. Make them think we're committed there. On the docks, a decoy shipment erupted in flames right on schedule. Emergency vehicles screamed toward the inferno while Bianchi soldiers emerged from hiding to secure their exposed position, exactly as planned. Kane assembled a strike team, each member handpicked and personally vetted. They moved through pre-mission checks with the smooth efficiency of men who understood the stakes. Thermal imaging shows at least 15 heat signatures in the target building, he reported. Multiple levels, with concentration in the sub-basement. Leone nodded, processing the intel. The sub-basement matched Celeste's location near generators. The guard count suggested a priority site. Each piece aligned with his instincts about the Riverside warehouse. In her cell, Celeste heard increased movement above, boots on metal, weapons being checked, orders given in tense voices. Something had changed in the atmosphere. The guards moved with new urgency, their patterns disrupted by whatever commands were coming through their earpieces. Leone's team assembled in the pre-dawn darkness, vehicles idling silently. He stood at the hood of the lead SUV, memorizing building schematics while his men did final weapons checks. The eastern sky hadn't yet begun to lighten, but the city thrummed with invisible currents of violence and preparation. He thought of Celeste's fingers on piano keys, her quick mind spotting patterns he'd missed, her refusal to break even when everything changed. The memory crystallized into cold focus. He'd built his power on control and calculation, but this was different. This was personal. He strapped on his vest, each buckle clicking into place like a promise. The weight of the knife pressed against his ankle, the grip of his pistol familiar in his palm. Around him, his men waited in professional silence, ready to move on his command. "Hold on," he whispered to the darkness, the words meant for no one and everyone at once. The city held its breath, balanced on the knife edge between night and dawn. In her cell, Celeste felt the vibrations change rhythm as vehicles moved outside. In the command center, Vittoria watched surveillance feeds while Kane coordinated strike teams, and Leone stood ready, violence coiled beneath his skin as the moment of action drew near. The pre-dawn air hung thick in Celeste's cell as Silvio's footsteps echoed down the corridor. She positioned herself carefully, knowing everything hinged on these next moments. When he appeared, she met his gaze with calculated disdain. "Come to gloat?" she asked, letting contempt color her voice. "Or just to practice being king?" Silvio's smile didn't waver, but something tightened around his eyes. "I prefer to think of it as correcting an imbalance." "Is that what you tell yourself?" Celeste shifted, testing the chain link behind her back. One section felt looser than the others. "That you're fixing things, when really you're still just arranging someone else's furniture." His composure cracked slightly. "You understand nothing about power." "I understand you've spent years as Leona's shadow," she pressed, working the metal harder, taking notes, running errands, watching him make the decisions you thought should be yours. Outside, engines died as Leone's convoy rolled silent into position. Kane moved like a ghost toward the power junction while Rocco secured their exit route. Leone checked his weapon one final time, night vision ready. "I've orchestrated every major move for a decade," Silvio snapped, stepping closer. "While Leone played at being Don, I built the infrastructure that kept this family functioning." "And yet here you are, explaining yourself to a hostage." Celeste felt the chain give slightly. "Still seeking validation from the people you think should fear you." Kane's signal came through, 3 clicks on the radio. Leone raised his fist, team in position. The flashbang sailed through the window. The world exploded into white as darkness flooded the building. Celeste was moving before her guards registered the change, swinging the loosened chain in a precise arc. It connected with a sickening crack against the nearest guard's knee. She rolled away from returning fire, metal walkways ringing with chaos above. "Leone!" Her voice cut through the mayhem, giving him a target. The response was immediate, controlled bursts of gunfire, moving systematically closer. Leone pushed through the warehouse with lethal efficiency, each shot purposeful despite the burning slice across his ribs where a defender's blade had found a gap in his vest. Celeste spotted a fallen guard's pistol and lunged for it, checking the magazine with practiced movements Leone had taught her. When he reached her position, she was already providing cover fire, protecting his injured side as if they'd rehearsed it. "Took you long enough," she said, not taking her eyes off their sector. "Traffic," he replied, the ghost of a smile in his voice despite the pain. They moved in sync, her watching their backs while he cleared the path forward, anticipating each other's movements with intuitive precision. Silvio had retreated to higher ground, but they tracked him by the sound of his orders growing more desperate. They cornered him on a metal catwalk, his hand raising to aim. Leone's shot was surgical, shattering Silvio's watch and the bones beneath it. The gun clattered away as Celeste's kick sent it spinning into darkness. "You can't!" Silvio started, but Leone's expression silenced him. Vittoria's team breached the far side right on schedule, sending the remaining Bianchi forces scrambling for escape routes that no longer existed. The shooting tapered to sporadic pops, then silence. Dawn painted the sky pink as emergency lights washed the scene in rotating red. Leone's shirt was dark with blood, but his eyes never left Celeste as the doctor worked. She stood within arm's reach, her own hands rust-colored but steady, refusing each attempt to draw her away for treatment. "The stitches will hold that," the doctor said finally, taping the bandage. "But he needs rest and antibiotics." Celeste helped Leone into the familiar SUV, the same one from that first night that felt like years ago. He settled against the seat with a carefully controlled exhale, reaching for her hand. Their fingers interlaced, both marked with dried blood and gunpowder. The city passed in a blur of early morning light, streets empty, as if holding their breath. Rocco drove with uncharacteristic gentleness, avoiding every pothole. Kane coordinated cleanup crews through his earpiece, voice low to avoid disturbing the quiet in the back seat. Celeste studied their joined hands, the contrast of her pianist's fingers against his trigger-worn ones. The vulnerability in how tightly he held on contradicted everything she'd first assumed about him. She remembered the warehouse that first night, how she'd cataloged everything as a prisoner seeking escape. Now she was choosing to return, not as collateral, but as something entirely different. The sunrise painted everything in soft gold as they wound up the coastal road. Leone's breathing had steadied, though his grip hadn't loosened. Each curve brought them closer to the villa on the cliffs, but the journey felt different now. Not an ending, but a beginning. The usual morning sounds filtered through the windows. Gulls crying, waves breaking, early fishing boats heading out to sea. The ordinary world was waking up, unaware that the balance of power had shifted in the darkness. The city behind them had gone quiet, but it was the silence of conclusion rather than threat. Celeste looked at Leon's profile against the leather headrest, saw the carefully hidden pain in the set of his jaw. His thumb traced absent patterns on her skin, an unconscious gesture that said more than words. She shifted closer, offering her shoulder as support, while Rocco navigated the final turns toward home. Afternoon sunlight filtered through the infirmary windows, casting warm squares across the medical equipment and pristine sheets. Leon stirred at the whisper of music. Delicate notes played with exquisite restraint. His eyes found Celeste at the window, her fingers dancing across a keyboard that hadn't been there when he'd fallen asleep. The doctor said soft sounds wouldn't disturb you, she explained without turning. I needed something to do besides watch you breathe. He shifted carefully, mindful of the stitches in his side. How long? 6 hours. The fever broke 2 hours ago. Her playing never faltered, though her shoulders relaxed at the clarity in his voice. Kane had the keyboard brought up from storage. Leon's gaze traveled to the bedside table where a neat stack of documents waited. A diplomatic passport, offshore account details, property deed, and a folded letter bearing his seal. Celeste followed his look, but kept playing, giving him space to find the words. There's a plane, fueled and waiting, he said finally. The apartment is in Geneva, neutral ground, good security, excellent music academies. The account has enough to fund whatever life you choose to build. Her fingers stilled on the keys. You're setting me free. You were never mine to keep. The words cost him, but he continued. I took you as collateral. I'm giving you back your choices. Celeste rose from the keyboard, moving to stand beside his bed. And if I choose to stay, then I spend the rest of my life making sure nothing threatens you again. His hand found hers, thumb tracing her knuckles. But it has to be your choice. No debts, no obligations. She studied their joined hands. You stopped being my jailer the night you took that bullet meant for me. Everything since then has been my choice. Throughout the afternoon, the villa hummed with careful activity. Vittoria commandeered Leone's study, directing the absorption of Silvio's assets with ruthless precision. Each account and holding was audited, cleaned, and folded into legitimate channels. Kane worked from the security office, implementing new protocols that required triple verification for any critical system access. Screens displayed updated patrol routes and guard rotations designed to eliminate blind spots. No one gets through unchecked again, he promised when Celeste passed by. Not ever. Around 4, a familiar voice echoed in the hallway. Isabel rushed into the infirmary, bypassing startled guards to wrap Celeste in a fierce hug. I swear to God, if you ever send me another one-word text like that. She pulled back to study her friend's face. Are you sure about this? Really sure? Celeste nodded. He's not what we thought. What I thought. Isabel's eyes narrowed at Leon. If you hurt her, no amount of security will save you. I'd expect nothing less, he replied gravely. As sunset approached, a small group gathered in the villa's private chapel. Centuries-old stone walls glowed amber in the fading light. Celeste wore a simple ivory dress that caught the colors from the stained glass. Leon stood straight despite his bandaged ribs, dark suit impeccable. Rocco and Kane flanked them as witnesses, both armed but relaxed. Vittoria held a leather-bound book, her voice steady, as she read ancient words of binding and protection. Leon turned to face Celeste, his usual mask of control softened by something deeper. You were collateral, he said quietly. You became my religion. He slipped a platinum band onto her finger, its surface engraved with the opening measure of her nocturne. Later, as stars began appearing over the city below, Celeste sat at her piano in the music room. The piece she'd held back for months finally flowed from her fingers, the nocturne that sounded like the moment before a storm. Leon stood in the doorway, watching her play with an intensity that had nothing to do with possession and everything to do with wonder. When the last note faded, he crossed to her. With careful movements that respected his healing wound, he lifted her onto the bench beside him. His voice was low against her ear. You're mine, forever. The ocean wind caught the lingering resonance of her music, carrying it out over their city where lights sparkled like earthbound stars. In the warmth of their shared space, the nocturne's echo transformed from a storm's warning into a promise of shelter, the sound of coming home. Around them, the villa settled into evening rhythms. Guards made their rounds, kitchen staff prepared dinner, and medical equipment beeped softly in the infirmary down the hall. The ordinary mixed seamlessly with the extraordinary, a perfect reflection of their unlikely path from captive and captor to equals choosing each other. Celeste leaned into Leon's uninjured side, feeling his steady heartbeat. The piano keys gleamed in the deepening dusk, waiting for the next song they would write together. Through the windows, city lights mirrored the emerging constellations, creating a bridge between earth and sky. Their new world stretched out before them, full of possibility and the hard-won peace they'd forged from chaos. The ring on her finger caught the last rays of sunset, the engraved notes a permanent reminder of how music had given her a voice when she needed it most. Now those same notes bound them together, not as a cage, but as an anchor, keeping them steady as they faced whatever storms might come.